Top of the hour now. Let's get straight to the major story of the morning. Hurricane Idalia making landfall just moments ago, 15 minutes ago to be exact, in Keaton Beach, Florida. We have new pictures coming in this morning showing the sheer devastation across Florida's Gulf Coast. Here are the stats at this hour. Winds clocking in at well over 120 miles an hour, slowly trudging up that coastline at less than 20 miles an hour. We're also watching the possibility of historic and life-threatening storm surge all along Florida's panhandle, up to 16 feet predicted in some areas. Millions across the state now bracing for the worst, with more than 100,000 already without power. Governor Ron DeSantis experiencing Idalia's wrath firsthand earlier this morning.
And it's going to be very, very dangerous. And there we go with our power here. We're back.
Scene that's going to play out many times over the coming hours. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Let's get right to our team that is spread across Florida as we track Hurricane Idalia. We're going to start with NBC News Now anchor Tom Yamas. He is in Crystal River, Florida. Tom, good morning. So this is north of Tampa, southeast sort of Cedar Key, and east of where the storm made landfall. Obviously, it looks like waters are rising behind you. Tell us about the conditions in the area you're in.
Yeah, hey, Savannah and Joe, how are you? So first, people have to understand this is sort of a slow-moving disaster in the part where we are in Crystal River. You're right. The major concern is the water here. It's supposed to be low tide, but the water's already moving up. And that's because of the storm surge. So at 4 o'clock, that's the point when they're going to know if this area is going to be completely flooded or not. And that's going to happen over several hours, obviously. I was speaking with the mayor just before we came on. He says they have a sort of a complex buoy system, very sophisticated, out in the Gulf where they can monitor the tides, at least for this area, because it is low lying. And he's saying the numbers they're seeing right now are several feet above average. So that's worrying him because, again, this should be low tide, and already we're seeing some flooding. North of us, that's where most of the damage is right now. But again, people are still careful here. They are under evacuation orders. People, if they didn't evacuate, they should still stay inside, because at 30 to 35 miles per hour, the sheriff here in Citrus County told me that his officers aren't going to be out and about. We're not feeling that right now. Every now and then we'll get a gust like right now, but it picks up a little bit. But by and large, where we are, so far, it's not too bad. Again, it's going to be a slow-moving disaster here in Crystal River because of the water. That's what they're watching, and that's really the main concern, because, you know, once that water comes through, there's nowhere for it to go, and you just have to wait. So they're waiting and they're watching the water here. There are power outages sporadically. We were under tornado watch earlier this morning. Those have since passed as the storm moves on. But, you know, it was interesting. People went to bed thinking this was a Category 3, something they had never seen before. They woke up, it was a Category 4 at one point this morning, just before making landfall. So it's come as a surprise to a lot of people. And as that track sort of shifts, you know, it wobbles right, wobbles left, different areas are experiencing a lot of damage. And, you know, to be fair, this thing moved a little further west, a little further north than a lot of people thought. So the areas south of Tallahassee are getting pounded right now. And I don't know if they were completely ready for that.
You know, this is still hitting an area that is not, say, as populated as a Tampa or farther south of that, Tom. But in general, folks there, they're used to hurricanes. They prepare for them all the time. What is the general mood from people in the area where you're at?
You know, I think because a major hurricane had never hit this Big Bend area, the nature coast, what they call it as well. You know, you have a lot of people who have second homes here. You have people who are retired here. This is an area where people come to swim with manatees. They come for the freshwater and the ocean flats fishing. So there's a lot of tourists here, but they had never seen a hurricane this size. So when I was talking to people, I could actually see it in their eyes. They were worried. Sometimes you talk to Floridians, and I'm a Floridian. I was born and raised in Miami. They're a little cavalier about storms, but here they seem to be really worried about this one. Since the track moved a little bit north of where we are, I think maybe more people stayed than they wanted to. I know that in Citrus County, the sheriff told me where we are, they were asking people to leave who just refused to leave, and there was nothing they could do at that point.
All right, and of course that becomes the concern if anybody does need rescuing who did not evacuate. They might have to wait that out. Tom Yamas, thank you very much. We'll check back in with you. Stay safe.
And Tom just mentioned Citrus County. We do want to bring in the Citrus County Fire Chief, Craig Stevens, for more as Florida is bracing and for this storm. Good morning. First of all, just tell us, what are you seeing right now? You guys are in some of the worst areas.
So obviously we're getting a lot of rain. Some of the bands are coming through. Some of the tropical force winds we've witnessed already. The wind bands are starting to pick up, and of course we are. We've got some low area flooding that's occurring. Some of our areas out towards the coast are starting to see water rising.
Yeah, so this is sort of, as you mentioned, coastal, seeing that water rising. You're between Tampa and Gainesville. This was an area that was ordered to evacuate earlier in the week. What have you seen from residents? Have people actually been heeding those warnings? Have they been evacuating? Are you concerned about any type of rescues that may need to take place, especially as day breaks?
Some of them, obviously, we have our hardcore people that are probably still there, and we'll go out there and we'll get them if we have to. But at this point, it's not as bad as we anticipated. So hopefully, it just depends on when that storm surge hits us.
Mm-hmm. Chief, you say you'll go out there and get them if you have to, but do you still need to wait for this storm to pass through? It's not something you can do instantly, right?
So it depends on the winds. If our winds exceed 45 miles an hour, then of course we pull our crews off the road. And we wait for the sustained winds to start to die down. Once those sustained winds die down, then we can resume missions.
What's your biggest concern in the aftermath of this as you are able to kind of get out there and see what's happened?
Our safety for the citizens that are still there, the power lines that are down, trees that are down, and then, of course, the stagnant water that's going to be there for some time. So.
All right. Citrus County Fire Chief Craig Stevens, we're thinking of you and your community right now. Thanks so much for joining us this morning and giving us an update.
Yeah, we appreciate your time. We're thinking about your community. Now, of course, let's get the latest on where Idalia is after making landfall and where it is headed.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman is back with an update. We know it's at landfall. The question is, what happens now? Hey, Angie.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, the question is, are people prepared across parts of the southeast? Because that's where it's going from now through really the next 24 hours. Latest details coming in just at the top of the hour. Winds at 120 miles per hour. Not a lot of change with that. We likely will see those numbers come down here through the rest of the morning as it continues to interact with the land and starts to weaken. 10 miles south-southeast of Perry, Florida right now, and moving northeast at 18 miles per hour. It's going to cruise across parts of this area of the country and eventually move offshore here by the time we get into Friday. So we'll look for that. As for what we're dealing with right now, the worst of what we're seeing occurring in this moment is that northern eye wall that folks in Perry and Dowling Park and up through Madison are eventually going to start to deal with. We do have extreme wind warnings in effect for folks there with upwards of 120 mile per hour winds possible. We were forecasting 127 mile per hour winds in that area. So not going to be surprised if we see really bad destruction of exactly where this area works through. That part of the eye is always the most destructive in the northern eye wall. This is going to last until 10:15. So they've got a couple of hours to deal with extreme wind in this area that you see outlined in the pink. As that continues to trek a little farther to the north, it will, of course, be impacting more communities to the north. Jasper, Madison, heads up if you are someone that stayed and you are hunkering down in that area and you're still able to connect with us and get this information. Right now, the latest gusts coming out of Perry say 71 miles per hour. That number likely coming up here as we go through at least the next 40 minutes or so. Pretty good gusts of wind elsewhere, more tropical storm-like as we look out towards Lake City, 45 miles per hour, even up into Valdosta, already into the low 40s for those gusts. And as far south as Leesburg, Brooksville, and Tampa still dealing with, again, those tropical storm-like conditions. We've also got the tornado watch in effect. So on top of the surge, the rain, and those strong winds, the potential for tornadoes is always there, especially in what we meteorologists call the right front quadrant of this storm. So if you divide it like this into four, with the forward motion, that right front area has the best chance of spinning up some tornadoes. A lot of times these are rain wrapped, which makes it very difficult for folks to see. If you're going through the storm in this area, you should be preparing like there is a tornado working through. But if you get a tornado watch or a warning in any of these other areas across the state of Florida and up into Georgia, you should be in the interior area of your house, away from the windows, because you may not know that it's coming with all of that rain wrapped around it. Of course, as the sun comes up, that makes it a little better for us, but still plenty of rain working through. Now, as we talk about the wind speeds right now, these are what we're expecting. I mentioned 127 miles per hour for Perry. Cedar Key, 72 miles per hour. We've already seen really incredible inundation happening in low tide for Cedar Key, 5.9 feet above ground. If you think about, say, a stop sign, that's about 7 feet. If you think about somebody that you know that is 6 feet tall, that is how much above ground level we're talking about water working in. A lot of homes that are in this area are likely flooded close to at least half of the first floor. When we get up to 12 feet, that's about the first floor of a home. Even down through Tampa, we saw plenty of flooding across Gulf Boulevard and in Port Tampa right now, 4.5 feet. If your structures are about 6 feet or higher, you're likely okay here by the time this is all said and done. But anything below that, you're probably going to come back to maybe some destruction when it comes to some flooding concerns. There's that tornado risk. It does extend all the way into parts of Charleston, Wilmington, Savannah. Heads up here as we get through the afternoon hours and even into tonight. These brief spin-ups are possible here as this system continues its northeasterly movement. Those storm surge numbers have not changed. Historic storm surge likely across much of the Nature Coast. The Big Bend area is where we're really concerned, especially as we go later into the day and we start to see that high tide getting into the picture, guys. This is going to be a really big issue for folks there, but we've already seen, as I mentioned, some of the issues when it comes to Tampa, St. Petersburg, the Barrier Islands, as far south as Pinellas County. That's going to be something to watch too, because we showed you the images, right, from I-275 in Tampa, and it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder about that high tide, as we just saw with our friend Tom Yamas, who's in Crystal River. It might look sort of calm there, or like maybe things are getting better, but actually later in the day as that tide changes, it's something to watch out for. Angie Lassman, thank you so much. We'll see you in a bit.
Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas, who joins us now from Gainesville, Florida, which, as we mentioned, is farther inland from where the storm made landfall. Still, they're going to deal with rain, they're going to deal with wind, the tornado threat Angie just mentioned. Guad, what's it like there right now?
Joe, we're about 75 miles east of where the storm made landfall here in Gainesville. We're right next to the University of Florida that canceled classes, of course, because of this storm. So we had rain all overnight, a lot of rain. Right now it's been a little lighter, but county authorities say that it's the wind that has been worrying them. Of course, we're under that tornado watch here. Just about an hour ago, they issued a tornado warning south of us in Marion County. We've had about a dozen tornado warnings the last time I checked in the last hour when the governor spoke and talked about these warnings, and of course a tornado watch that remains for a large part of central Florida. You can see some of the rain and some of the wind in the trees behind me. So authorities here are really warning residents about the possibility of downed trees and also power lines that could be damaged by these winds. They do have outages reported in this county as well as other parts of Florida. The last time I checked, the report was about 140,000 customers all across the state having interruptions in their power service. And of course, most of those outages are just west of us where the storm made landfall. But we also have some of those here further west. You can see how the wind gusts just pick up every minute or so. They'll come in. And this is what county authorities have warned residents about as we expect more of this wind and more of this rain to make its way through Gainesville. Joe.
Absolutely. Hey, Guad, it's Savannah. So, since you're more inland, things like storm surge kind of less of a concern in that area. You mentioned power outages, though, being something to watch out for, as well as that tornado warning, which is something that much of the state is dealing with. What is it that you're hearing from residents who maybe are sort of used to some bad weather in the area, but, having the fact that they're inland, not necessarily waiting for that water or anything like that? What are people feeling? What are people thinking?
Well, Savannah, first of all, Gainesville is a city that about a fourth of the residents are college students. So the university played a big part preparing the college students for the storm. A lot of the residents are also curious. They came outside this morning in the area we're at to ask us if the storm was over, if the worst was over, because it can be tricky when you get these outer bands. You'll get a lot of rain, a lot of wind, and then it'll kind of die down, and then more will come. So people want to know if the worst has passed. But county authorities are asking everyone to bunker down and wait for more rain and more wind to make its way through, because as we can see in the radar, the storm is still making its way through this part of Florida. So there's still dangers out there. And there are reports already within the county here of downed trees and, as I mentioned, damage to the power infrastructure that has caused some interruptions for some of the customers. So there are some dangers out there. So authorities want people to bunker down and wait for the rain and the wind to make its way through as we continue to be under this tornado watch.
All right, Guad, thank you so much. We want to go right to NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, who is in the thick of things right now in Perry, Florida. He and his team are doing their best to stay safe while also bringing us these incredible pictures. Gabe, what can you tell us?
Hey there, Joe. Well, this is Hurricane Idalia. We are in the thick of it, and we are getting pounded by some heavy winds and heavy rain that we've only seen intensify over the last hour or so. Right behind me, a few minutes ago, Joe, there was a billboard. There is no longer a billboard behind me. It was ripped apart and it collapsed. We're keeping a close eye on some nearby power lines. Don't worry, we're far enough away, and my crew can go inside at any sign of trouble. But you can see these winds really picking up. There's nobody on the roads right now. Local authorities had said that once the winds reached 45 miles an hour, they wouldn't be able to respond to calls, that people were essentially on their own. We're well past that point. The winds here, wind gusts, I'm told, are over 100 miles an hour. And we are really feeling the brunt of this storm. An unprecedented storm hitting the Big Bend area. They have never seen a storm this powerful in terms of wind surge. And Joe, the story in other parts of Florida has been storm surge, 10 to 15 feet expected. That's not the case in this particular town. It's a town of 7,000 people that's actually 20 miles inland. The story here is the wind, as you can clearly see. Unclear at this point what the damage will be, but local authorities expect that it will be extensive. In winds this high, essentially a tornado, mobile homes and structures that weren't built in the last few years will have a very difficult time staying up. Just to let you know where we are, we're in a hotel. It lost power now several hours ago. Several local residents who left their homes and are hunkering down here, as well as some members of the media, are also here. And we're trying to stay safe, and we'll go inside as soon as we can. But we can show you, Joe and Savannah, that the winds are only intensifying here, and we expect them to get only worse in the next few hours. Joe?
Absolutely. Hey, Gabe, it's Savannah. So you mentioned you're about 20 miles inland, and it's about a half-hour drive pretty much straight north of Keaton Beach, which is where this made landfall about a half hour ago now. As this storm's track has kind of wobbled, changed a little bit, both north and south, as we've been projecting it, how prepared was this area for this to be as bad as it currently is, as dramatic as these winds are?
Look, emergency management officials, including the governor, have been warning that this storm had the possibility to be extremely powerful over the last several days. People were warned. Not everyone heeded that warning, however. As we get another wind squall here, not everyone heeded those evacuation warnings. And at this point, that's unfortunate because it is very dangerous here in terms of the wind speed. Again, the most powerful hurricane in terms of wind speed to hit this area. If there is a small, and I say small bit of good news here, it's that the hurricane made landfall in a place that isn't as heavily populated as other parts of Florida. It hit the wetlands. Keaton Beach, obviously, will be heavily impacted, and they will have to deal with storm surge. Too early to tell exactly how this area is dealing with the damage. We should know that later today when people start to assess the damage. But I can tell you, not everybody evacuated. At this point, people are hunkered down. Unclear what the property damage will be. But these winds are powerful. Savannah and Joe.
Gabe, you have covered a number of hurricanes over the years. Right now, in this moment, just how does this one compare with what you've experienced in the past?
Look, hurricanes, they are unpredictable in a sense. The forecast models tell you one thing, but to be really standing here feeling the power of the storm is something else. I've covered many storms in Florida. The ones that immediately come to mind, Irma several years ago that hit in 2017. Hurricane Michael will always stick with me for how it wiped out Mexico Beach. I had never seen destruction like that before. In terms of this storm, too early to tell. I can tell you the winds they're up there. Not as much as, say Irma or or Ian even, but it is getting up there. And again, these wind speeds more than 100 miles an hour right now. They will devastate any community. And my hope is that this, that the property damage isn't as extensive as some people fear it might be.
Yeah, Gabe, on that note, just a quick question before we let you go. You had mentioned we were with you as that billboard started to destruct that you now say is gone. Of course, the concern for something like a mobile home. Structurally, right now, how is something like that hotel that you're in and that residents are hunkering down in doing?
The hotel seems pretty good right now. It's a concrete building, 3 floors, and we can go inside immediately. If we needed to evacuate or if we, see any of these power lines or power poles or any other structural damage. From what I can see from my eyes right now, the billboard is the only thing that's really come down. The power lines are still intact, but again, tens of thousands of people across Florida are without power right now. Again, in these types of wind speeds, mobile homes can be destroyed. Well, we won't know the full extent of the damage, though, for the next few hours as the storm continues to make its way into other states, Georgia, South Carolina, bringing heavy rain along with it. We're getting a lot of rain right now, but the immediate concern over the next hour or two here in Perry is the wind. Joe and Savannah?
Gabe, we want to give you the opportunity to get inside that stable building for a moment to get some rest. We appreciate your reporting. You and your team, please continue to stay safe. We'll check in with you as much as we can throughout the morning.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.